There's a part of you you've been taught to silence. A voice that whispers forbidden thoughts, inconvenient truths, primal instincts. And yet what, if that voice you fear is not a curse, but a compass? What if the part of you you've rejected is the very key to the clarity, strength, and purpose you've been seeking all along? In this journey, you'll come face to face with your inner shadow, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because within that chaos lives your superpower. Stay until the end, because the very thing you're afraid to confront may become the thing that finally sets you free. There is a force within you that you have been conditioned to fear. It does not wear a mask of kindness, nor does it speak the polite language of social acceptance. It is raw. It is impulsive. It is filled with emotion, rage, lust, longing, pride, defiance, and yet it is you. Not a mistake. Not an invader. Not an enemy. You were born with it. You've simply been taught to pretend it doesn't exist. This force is what we call the shadow. Not a demon to be exorcised, but a mirror to be studied. It is everything you have refused to be, yet secretly are. And herein lies the paradox. What you suppress gains strength. What you confront transforms. Many walk through life believing that goodness means the absence of darkness, that virtue is the suppression of vice. But this is a lie crafted by those afraid of complexity. The shadow is not the enemy of your light. It is its birthplace. It is your hidden source of vitality. When you ignore it, it acts without your awareness through passive aggression, self-sabotage, anxiety, resentment, and the haunting feeling that you are not whole. When you befriend it, you begin to wield your own soul with conscious intention. And that is power, not dominance over others, but dominion over oneself. You see, the world tells you to be kind, agreeable, positive, forgiving. These are admirable qualities, but not if they are performed at the expense of truth. Not if they are masks hiding suppressed anger, swallowed dreams, and unspoken pain. So many live a half-life, always smiling, always nodding, always apologizing. But beneath the surface brews unrest. The shadow grows restless in the darkness of neglect. It whispers when you're alone. It emerges in dreams as chaos, and it leaks out in moments of unexpected emotion, when you lash out, when you collapse, when you say, "I don't know what came over me." But you do know. Something inside you has been crying for air. Your anger has a voice. Your ambition has a face. Your lust, your jealousy, your need to rebel. These are not stains on your soul. They are signals. They tell you that you have unmet needs, unrealized potential, unlived life. When you push them away, you don't kill them, you merely hand them the steering wheel of your unconscious mind. And that is when you become lost to yourself, divided, confused, and haunted by your own reflection. The path forward is not to erase the shadow, but to turn toward it with curiosity and courage. You must ask it what it wants, what it fears, what it needs, and you must listen not to validate destructive behavior, but to reclaim your own energy. The shadow contains your boldness, your assertiveness, your truth-telling, your creativity. Even your capacity to love fiercely is stored there, buried beneath shame and conditioning. So when you encounter your darker impulses, do not flinch. Approach them as parts of yourself that were exiled, long ago, wandered by judgment, rejected by society, perhaps even misunderstood by your own family. But they are you, and without them, you remain incomplete. Repression is not redemption. It is exile, and exile breeds chaos. People often believe they are good because they deny their darkness. But in truth, denial is a ticking time bomb. It manifests in projections. We see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. We condemn others for the very traits we unconsciously carry: arrogance, greed, pride, manipulation. We call them monsters, while ignoring the monster within. And yet, what is a monster, if not a part of the human soul we have failed to understand? Look at history. Look at the atrocities committed not by psychopaths, but by ordinary people convinced they were righteous. Look at the cruelty that flows from suppressed rage, the harm that is done in the name of purity. When we disown our darkness, we become dangerous not because we are evil, but because we are unconscious. That is why integrating the shadow is not just a personal task, it is a moral obligation. Only by recognizing the evil within ourselves do we become capable of preventing it in the world. Now ask yourself, what have you disowned? What part of you have you hidden away because it was too loud, too wild, too hungry? What dreams did you bury because someone told you they were impractical, selfish, or grandiose? What truths did you swallow to keep the peace, to avoid rejection, to feel safe? These are the ghosts of your unlived life. And they do not go quietly. They linger in the corners of your psyche, causing restlessness, numbing, addiction, and a vague feeling that something is missing even when everything appears fine on the surface. To reclaim your wholeness, you must venture into the wilderness of your own soul. You must become the curious witness to your own contradictions. The shadow is not an obstacle to your purpose, is the path to your purpose, because in it lies the map to everything you've denied. Your boundaries, your passions, your hunger for justice, your desire to speak your truth. Your shadow reveals your real wants, not the wants imposed by culture or compliance. And that is why it is sacred, not clean, not sanitized. Sacred. Most people are haunted by what they do not understand within themselves. But you have the capacity to transform that haunting into guidance. The moment you stop fearing your impulses and start listening to them with discernment, something extraordinary happens. Clarity begins to emerge. You no longer live reactively, you live intentionally. You no longer need to control the world, because you have learned to regulate your inner storm. You become a center of gravity. Others feel it. The chaos around you loses its grip when the chaos within you is faced, named, and embraced. To walk this path, you must cultivate honesty, a radical kind that does not seek applause. You must be willing to say, yes, I have anger. Yes, I feel envy. Yes, I crave power. These admissions do not make you unworthy. They make you real. And only when you are real can you truly grow. Growth does not happen through pretending to be good. It happens through confronting what isn't, deciding, day by day, to act from wholeness rather than illusion. This is not easy work. It will cost you your false self. It will strip away the version of you that people liked, because you were easy to control. It will demand solitude, reflection, and the courage to be misunderstood. But in exchange, it will give you something priceless, freedom. Not the shallow freedom of doing whatever you want, but the deep freedom of no longer being at war with yourself. The shadow is not only a vault of your pen, it is a vault of your power. When you unlock it, you gain access to emotional intelligence, spiritual resilience, and fierce authenticity. You become less interested in being liked and more committed to being whole. And slowly, the need to prove yourself fades. Because you are no longer seeking permission to exist, you are learning to exist in fullness. So, consider this. The parts of you that you've labeled too much, too intense, or unacceptable, what if they are the source of your unique genius? What if your temper, once understood, becomes your boundary-setting power? What if your sensitivity, once embraced, becomes your empathy? What if your hunger for greatness is not arrogance, but calling? What if your darkness, once integrated, becomes your light? You are not here to be a flat version of yourself. You are here to become dimensional, alive, and awake. And that journey begins the moment you stop trying to kill your shadow and instead begin to dialogue with it. Not every desire is meant to be acted upon, but every desire is meant to be examined. Through that examination, you retrieve your lost fire. The paradox is this. The more you run from the shadow, the more control it has over you. But the more you face it, the more it becomes your ally. It is the guardian of your inner treasure, disguised as fear, shame, and discomfort. And that treasure, it is your vitality, your clarity, your voice. So take the step. Look within. You will not be consumed by what you find. You will be expanded. You will be sobered. Yes, humbled, confronted. But you will also be liberated. Because in the shadow lies your truth. And truth is the only foundation upon which anything meaningful can be built. To walk the path of integration is to enter the deep forest of your own contradictions. Not to eliminate them, but to live in harmony with them. Most people spend their lives trying to escape themselves. They chase distractions, titles, pleasures, or ideologies, hoping to silence the internal noise that keeps rising in moments of stillness. But the more you avoid what is within, the more fragmented you become. There is no peace in avoidance, only temporary numbness. True peace, true power, is born when you choose to stop running, when you turn inward and say, "Here, I am all of me." This is the beginning of wholeness. Wholeness is not perfection. It is not about becoming a flawless ideal. It is about becoming complete. And completeness requires contradiction. You must carry both light and shadow, joy and sorrow, power and humility. To be whole is to contain multitudes. It is to no longer reject parts of yourself just because they make others uncomfortable. It is to recognize that even your wounds carry wisdom. Your anger tells you where you've been violated. Your fear shows you where you are not free. Your sadness speaks of what you've loved and lost. and your envy reveals the life you secretly desire. These emotions are not enemies, they are messages from the depths. To ignore them is to lose access to the intelligence of the soul. You cannot be whole if you are not honest. And honesty requires you to tell yourself the truth, even when it contradicts your public image, even when it disrupts your comfort, even when it risks disapproval. You cannot be whole if you are living only as a projection of what others want you to be. Integration demands the courage to disappoint the world, if it means you can finally meet yourself. Because the moment you stop pretending is the moment you become real, and only the real self can transform. It is through integration that clarity begins to arise. You begin to understand the patterns that once confused you. Why you sabotaged relationships. Why you feel hollow after achievement. Why you lash out at loved ones, or silence your truth to keep peace. These are not mysteries. They are the outcomes of an unexamined inner world. When the unconscious is denied, it does not vanish, it controls you from the shadows. But once brought to the surface, it begins to lose its grip. You are no longer driven by compulsions you don't understand. You begin to act with intention. This is what it means to live with depth, and you will discover something else along the way. The parts of you that once felt shameful or weak now reveal themselves as sacred. Your sensitivity, for example, once mocked or hidden, becomes your gateway to empathy and intuition. Your anger, when purified, becomes the fuel for justice and boundary setting. Your darkness, once understood, becomes your discipline and discernment. You no longer divide yourself into good and bad. You become a living paradox, not to confuse, but to transcend. Authenticity is not a single mood or persona. It is the alignment between your inner world and outer expression. It is when your speech reflects your truth, your choices reflect your values, and your relationships reflect your soul. This authenticity requires you to embrace your full humanity. You are not here to be cleanly categorized. You are not here to be consistently agreeable. You are here to live honestly, to feel deeply, to struggle meaningfully, and to rise through it all with grace and grit. The process of becoming whole will break the mask you've spent years constructing. But behind that mask is a face the world desperately needs to see. The culture around you may not encourage this. It wants you to be efficient, polished, marketable. It wants you to reduce yourself to a brand, a slogan, a commodity. But the soul resists reduction. The soul wants depth, and that depth is found not in becoming flawless, but in embracing complexity. You are not either or, you are both, and you can be strong and tender, wise and confused, disciplined and passionate, calm and furious. And the more you allow yourself to hold those tensions without breaking, the more whole you become. There is immense power in authenticity, not loud power, not performative power, but quiet, grounded, magnetic power. People are drawn to those who are unapologetically themselves, not because they are perfect, but because they are true. In a world full of masks, the person who stands in their truth becomes a mirror. They remind others of what is possible when you stop hiding. And this is how healing begins, not just for you, but for others who are watching. Because wholeness is contagious. When you allow your full self to emerge, you give silent permission for others to do the same. But this path will test you. There will be moments of loss. When you stop performing, some will leave. When you stop pleasing, some will criticize. When you speak your truth, some will reject you, and it will hurt. Because deep down, we all long to belong. But ask yourself this: do you want to be loved for a version of yourself that is not real? Or do you want to be seen, even if it means being misunderstood? This is the cost of wholeness, the loss of false approval. But what you gain in return is worth far more: the freedom to live without betrayal of self. As this process deepens, something else will begin to shift, the way you perceive the world. Because the outer world is always a reflection of your inner one. When you are at war within, you see enemies everywhere. When you are divided, life appears chaotic and meaningless. But as you integrate, life begins to mirror that clarity back to you. Relationships become more honest. Work becomes more aligned. Choices become more intuitive. You stop chasing and start creating. You stop reacting and start responding. You no longer feel like a victim of life, you become a participant. In its unfolding, you begin to realize that what you thought was weakness was actually depth. That the parts of you you once rejected are the parts that make you uniquely human. And that your flaws are not barriers to your purpose, they are pathways to it. Because in the process of healing, you develop qualities that can never be learned from a textbook: compassion, resilience, presence, authenticity. These are the markers of a person who has met their shadow and returned with gold. And then something beautiful happens. You stop being ashamed of your story. You stop hiding your struggles. You begin to speak from scars, not wounds, from lessons, not just pain. You no longer feel the need to present a perfect life, because you've discovered something far more valuable, a truthful life. And truth, no matter how messy, resonates. It connects. It heals. Not just you but those around you who are also searching for courage. In this state of integration, life becomes less about controlling outcomes and more about trusting your inner compass. The noise of the world fades. In comparison to the clarity of your soul, you stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for alignment. And alignment is everything. Because when your actions match your values, when your words match your feelings, when your choices match your truth, you become whole. And from this wholeness, you move through the world not as someone desperate to be seen, but as someone grounded in their own being. But the world doesn't just change because you've changed. It responds to you differently. People sense the difference. They feel your presence. Because when you are no longer fragmented, you radiate coherence. When you are no longer pretending, you radiate depth. When you are no longer afraid of yourself, you stop fearing the world. This is the transformation the soul longs for, not a better mask, but a true self. And when others speak from insecurity, you hear their pain instead of taking it personally. When the world throws chaos at you, you meet it with clarity instead of collapse. When you fail, you don't spiral into shame. You learn and rise because you know who you are. Not in an abstract way, but in the marrow of your being. You have walked through your own fire. You have held your own brokenness. You have loved what you once feared, and that makes you unshakable. This is the deeper purpose of the shadow. Not just to reveal what you've hidden, but to initiate you into your full humanity. It is not a flaw in your psychology. It is a vital function of your wholeness. It is the threshold between the persona and the soul. And when you cross it, you do not become someone new. You become who you truly were, before the world told you who to be. And now you stand at that threshold not because you are broken, but because you are ready. Ready to integrate, ready to embody, ready to stop dividing yourself in order to be loved. Ready to live in alignment with a deeper truth than comfort or conformity. Ready to remember that your power was never in your perfection, but in your presence, in your ability to hold all of who you are without shame, without apology, without fear.